Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Landlord Tries to Keep Security Deposit. No. About 10 years ago, my at-the-time girlfriend, now wife, and I moved from the area we went to college to an apartment near where we planned to start our careers. I say it was an apartment, but it was really the basement of a house that the landlord had walled off to create 2 apartments to rent. The place was kinda crappy, but the rent was cheap for the area, and we were close to work. Everything was fine for a few months, but the only parking for us was on the street out front. The couple that rented the upstairs apartment had rights to the garage and driveway. They paid more than we did. Suddenly my car got a couple BS tickets for parking on the street. I'm guessing some clown cop needed to meet their quota, and my girlfriend's car got sideswiped in a hit and run. This crap had to stop, so we emailed the landlord, her preferred form of communication, to ask if there's anywhere safe for us to park. She replies, "Park anywhere you want." We had noticed that our upstairs neighbors usually eschewed the driveway to park in the front yard. They were horribly lazy, so we figured that would be a good spot for us too. We parked in the front yard the rest of the year. We figured that would be the end of it. We finished our lease, left the place in better shape than we found it, and requested our $1,500 security deposit back. After a couple weeks, we got a check for $700. What the duck? Since there was no explanation, we asked the landlord for one, and she replied that the deducted amount was to re-sod the lawn, claiming that parking on it had damaged it. Now, I was the one who cut the grass at this house while we stayed there, so I was well aware that the lawn was more weeds and bald spots than grass. Picture the African savanna in midsummer. No one had ever lifted a finger to landscape any part of the property, but the landlord wanted to sell the house once the leases were up, and she figured she could get the renters to pay for a nice, new lawn. I complained to the landlord, didn't care. I put in a complaint with the local housing department, didn't care. I threatened to take her to court, didn't care. So, that's what I did, took her to small claims court. I had never sued anyone before, so I was going in prepared. I took pictures of the entire front yard. The area that we damaged was actually one of the best patches of grass, though it did have a small rut that my tires made when the yard was muddy in the summer. I got testimonials from our upstairs and across the street neighbors. Most importantly, I printed out the email where the landlord told us to park anywhere. We were suing for $1,800 to cover court costs and us both missing a day of work on top of the full security deposit. In mediation, we said we would settle for $1,400, but she must have thought she was in the right because she refused to offer a penny more than the original $700 check, which we never cashed. When we got in front of the judge, it was pretty clear that she had no evidence, hadn't prepared anything, and just assumed that us kids would fall on our faces. We did not. We put everything we had in front of the judge and made our claim. He was impressed. He stopped us when we showed him the email to ask the landlord, "Did you really tell them to park wherever they wanted?" When she said, "Yes," the judge replied, "Then what are we even talking about?" And that was that. Judgment in full for us, and that witch had to pay to re-sod her own damn lawn. Next time you tell someone to park wherever you want, you'd better mean it. Or at least don't try to duck someone over when they comply with what you said. The next one is titled, It Hit the Fan. To preface this, I work as a wastewater technician. My job involves taking a truck with a 600-gallon water tank and a diesel-powered compressor and blowing clogs out of sewer lines. Your toilets back up? I'm the guy the city sends out with some big mad scientist gloves and rubber boots. I love my job, not because of the subject matter, but because of the laid-back way the job operates. And the pay and benefits don't suck either. So a few weeks back, me and my coworker get a call out to this house. I look up the address, find the lateral sewer line from the house to the main on the map, and then look at the call history. This one's a problem child, and the notes even make mention of the resident at this address being nasty and deliberately failing to follow instructions on sewer maintenance. The fact that someone actually had to give them instructions on how to not flush hand towels down the toilet really speaks volumes here. Actual cotton hand towels, not just wet wipes. I know they say they're flushable. They really aren't. Well, we get out there, and there's a city councilman waiting for us. Turns out that the resident is their relative, somehow. I didn't dig too far, and only found that out afterwards. Whatever, we do our job and check the city cleaner, which is usually at the front of your yard under a little metal lid. Most people's are grown over by their lawn, and there's no flowing or standing water there. This is where our job should have ended. The city's responsibility only extends to from the sewer main to that cleanout. No further. Well, the councilman starts telling us to run our line further up. I explain that we have to have the residents sign a waiver holding the city harmless for damages if we do that, and I have to get authorization from the wastewater department manager. The usual hoops, you know. He gets on the phone with my boss and starts rattling his cage about this, so my boss calls me on my phone, says, "Look, I know and you know that this is a bad idea, but do what he says, or he's gonna make our lives hell." I agree. The resident signs the waiver after we inform her of what could happen, and we start searching for the resident cleanout to push our line through and down to the sewer, so it'll clear the entire lateral line. Well, we can't find it. It's probably under the porch that was added sometime in the last 3 years, and we can't get to it. Councilman goes ballistic over this, of course, because how dare we peons impede his ability to impress his own family. I call my boss back and inform him of this, and he says that lateral runs into a manhole, right? Just go through the manhole and up towards the house. The reason that I really didn't want to do this is that the compressor on the truck pushes out water at something near 4000 psi, depending on which head we have on the hose. But the big man hath spoken. I log my token objection while fitting the lowest pressure head I have, because to hell with this, and hang up. Me and my coworker open the manhole, find the end of the lateral, and run the hose up to where we think the clog is. And fire. Suddenly, all kinds of stuff comes flowing out of the line. We cleared the clog. Yay us. We tell the resident to go flush her toilet so we can make sure it's flowing properly. She goes back in, and then comes storming out, screaming about suing the city, we've destroyed her home, etc. I don't need to listen, because I already know what happened, and she'd been warned. The pressure blew back up the 4 inches wide lateral, right up to her toilet, and out of it, along with everything in its way. It hit the ceiling. It hit the window. It hit the walls. Councilman blows a gasket, and I point out that she signed a waiver, and that my boss has every call to or from his office recorded as a matter of official communication, so we have him ordering us to do this, and had informed both of them of the risks prior. We then left and headed back to the yard and left that guy screaming into a phone. My boss didn't stop laughing for at least 10 minutes after we got back, and started making photocopies of the waiver form we'd had the resident sign. I heard there was some kerfluffle about the whole incident at the next big meeting, and those photocopies were distributed, along with the recording of the councilman's call. I never heard of it going further than that. The next one is titled, "Get Out and Clip the Hedges." Lol. Okay. A couple of friends of mine told me that I really should tell this story here. It's pretty old, but screw it. This happened the summer of 2018. I had a summer job doing graveyard maintenance. So mowing the grass, cleaning gravestones, planting and watering flowers, and clipping hedges. We use a motorized hedge saw for efficiency and speed. P.S. I got the job since my parents know the boss. Since they also work for her. This particular day it was a blistering 32°C in the sunlight. I'm warm-blooded, so I was suffering more than my on-site manager. I went through probably 4 liters of water in 3 hours and I was still feeling nauseous. I asked my manager if I could take an extra break because of the heat. He denied and told me to go clip the hedges. I tried explaining to him that I am warm-blooded and that in 32°C I could not work efficiently thanks to this. He didn't care and just handed me the equipment. This included a shoulder cross strap, a helmet with earmuffs, steel-tipped boots and the 8 kg machine. I was feeling that I wasn't going to last long in the sunlight. I was already dehydrated and was pushing myself too much. So I asked him if it couldn't wait until a less sunny day. He ignored me. And told me to get to work. I just replied with a "lol, okay." I worked for probably a solid half hour before I blacked out. I woke up in an ambulance around an hour later. With my boss sitting next to me checking if I was alright. She told me that I had been found by a stranger between a couple of gravestones out cold, with a revving machine in my hands. I was in such bad shape that I was rushed to the hospital and put on intensive care. I couldn't move and had severe dehydration. So I was put on drips for 2 days in order for me to recover. I recovered slowly and was moved to cleaning duty inside. My manager was fired for endangering me and not heeding what I said. The next one is titled, "That Dang Fence Again." Growing up in the South, fences never last too long. The constant barrage of torrential downpours, drought, excessive humidity, hurricanes, and just overall conditions, you're extremely lucky if the fences last 6 to 10 years. That being said, my family always kept good relationships with the neighbors, and when it came time to replace the fence, each side usually went 50-50 with the cost. My dad was young, our shared fence neighbors were elderly, so my dad would typically do the labor for free, with my help. And our fence lines were long. One side alone was 75 to 125 feet, we had roughly 300 feet of total fence line for our backyard. On the sides of the garage, there's typically a pathway, about 4 to 5 feet wide, with a wooden gate for access into the backyard. Many years ago during a rebuild, one of the neighbors had told my dad to not worry about the side area, just built the fence from our house directly to the front corner of his garage, and from behind the garage to back wall. He thought we all could save time and money by using less fencing because he never used the side walkway, more area for our dog, larger background for us kids to play in, etc. A real win-win for every party involved. So the fence went up and connected directly to and from his garage, giving us a few extra feet and we continue with our peaceful existence just fine. Unfortunately, about 2 years later, that old man passed and we got a new neighbor who was a bit off. We later found out she was a hoarder and never cared about the outside, or inside, of her house and everything rotted away. It was a real shame. When she moved in, we introduced ourselves and explained the situation with the fence and she said no worries. Life went on. Mid-2000s and she was let go from her job and decided to find herself and live off her severance package for a while and didn't look for new employment. Hurricane Ike hit in 2008 and almost all the fences needed to be replaced. One neighbor went in 50-50, the other neighbor said she wouldn't contribute, she ran out of severance and it was difficult finding a new job with no work history for 3 years. So we said it's fine, we understand, we'll fix it, we're supportive neighbors after all. And then she got kind of nasty, and make sure it's done right this time. Don't encroach on my property. Follow the property lines. Well, okay. So when we rebuilt the fence, we built it on our property line, like it should have been, but now there was a 4 to 5 foot gap where a gate should have gone. That's on her property, i.e., her responsibility. Which we told her she'll need to take care of it. I guess she forgot, because the next time she let her poor pup outside, it ran away, out the missing gateway. Oops. She didn't like us all that much after that incident and never spoke to us. Until she recently walked away from her house after owning it for 15 years. Her hoarding had destroyed the inside, the outside was in tatters and I guess she fell behind with the bank and they repossessed it. The new owners put a bunch of money into fixing it up and they're pleasant people. The next one is titled, "You Want New Turf? You Can Have It." This isn't my story, this is my dad's and happened about 10 years ago in Sydney, Australia. My dad was doing work for the local water utilities company Sydney Water and his job involved repairing sewer pipes throughout the city. His stint repairing pipes lasted about 2 years before he moved on. Anyway, one particular job was the repair of a pipe in someone's backyard. The backyard, as said by my dad, was about 50% grass and the rest was just dirt. A dust bowl, in his own words. Some ground was dug up 2 by 3 meters roughly, which is 6 by 9 feet, and the pipe was repaired. Everyone's happy, except, yes, you guessed it, the owner of the house with the shitty backyard. The assigned inspector for the job received a complaint a day after the repair took place and the complaint was passed on to my dad. Apparently, the area which was dug up wasn't sufficiently restored to its original state before the repair took place. My dad was asked to return and restore the ground. This is where the fun starts. He rocks up at this bloke's place, cuts the 2x3 meter rectangle out, digs out 200 mm 8 inches of soil and replaces the turf with the best possible and most expensive soil he can find and tops that with notoriously fast-growing and luscious green kikuyu grass. On top of this, the grass was fertilized very generously, and every day for the next week this patch of grass was watered. Within 2 weeks, this immaculate-looking, perfectly cut rectangular patch of grass sitting in the middle of this Dust Bowl backyard stood out like a turd in a punch bowl. This thing looked so ducking stupid. The owner never called back, and for good reason. He got his bloody restoration. The next one is titled, "She Asked for a Blanket So I Gave Her One." I had some friends over, one male with his wife, the other 3 female. One of the female, we'll call Jane, had a baby 2 months ago, and this is the first time that we have seen her. She was away at family's when she had her baby, so this was a small unplanned baby shower for her. After an hour or so, her baby got fussy and she started breastfeeding her baby. One of the friends started looking upset and asked, "Don't you think you should cover up, especially since there is a man here?" We all just kind of looked at her. My male friend said it's okay, his wife breastfeeds. And his wife nods her head. Well, this upset friend and looked towards me and said to get a blanket. So I got her one and she said no, it's to cover up with. So I did as she asked and opened up the blanket, all the while all the other people were giving me a strange look, and I covered friend's head and sat back down. Friend got mad and took it off and said not that Jane needs to cover. I said what for? Friend gets up and tries to put the blanket on Jane. I finally had enough and said if she didn't like seeing someone breastfeed then she can either look away or leave. Yeah, she got mad saying how I'm choosing Jane over her and that she known me longer. I told her that you should know by now that I don't believe in covering up regardless of where you are at, and that it's my house. I also told her that she knows what a pain it is trying cover up a breast in a screaming wiggle baby's mouth, so have a nice day. So yeah, she is mad at me, but the rest of us had a good time visiting. The next one is titled, "We Couldn't Find Anything Wrong with the Valve." A couple of years ago I took an engineering design course in college. One of the major assignments was to disassemble and reassemble a lawn mower engine and get it to run afterwards. I'm a car enthusiast and mechanic in training, so this sort of assignment was right up my wheelhouse. I was given my engine, a small single-piston lawn mower engine mounted to a wooden slab. I fill it with oil and start it up and it runs just fine. Fair enough. I begin the disassembly process. I get down to the valves, and I found the exhaust valve in particular difficult to remove. I don't know how it happened in between running it and now, but the exhaust valve had bent, meaning it was binding with the cylinder head. This meant that it could stay closed when the engine is running, which is obviously very bad. In fact, turning the crankshaft by hand confirmed this. We were told to report any defects found to the engineering faculty so we could get replacement parts. I brought the bent valve to my professor, explained the problem, even showed him in the engine what was happening. He had the engineering department at my school take a look at it over the weekend and give me a new part. Come Tuesday, and the bent valve is returned to me. Apparently they couldn't find the problem. I certainly wasn't seeing things. You could clearly tell just by looking at it that the valve was bent. I went back and pressed them harder. My grade in the course depended on whether or not the engine ran after it had been reassembled. After several attempts with no luck, I pleaded with my professor. He was sympathetic. He told me to make sure nothing else was defective and reassemble the engine, and he would be lenient with my grade. He and I both knew what could happen if that valve sticks. Knowing I had a strong case with my professor, I reassemble the engine. Everything else seems to be in working order. Knowing crap is about to hit the fan, I fill it with oil, gasoline, then go to start it once more. Only this time it wouldn't start. A few more attempts at the puller with no luck, until all of a sudden bang. What sounded like a gunshot echoed across the campus. The engine was then sent to the engineering department. The exhaust valve was in multiple pieces. The piston was destroyed, the cylinder wall was cracked, and you could see where the building exhaust gases desperately tried to escape the compression chamber. The engine was toast. In my plea, I mentioned the bent valve and how I tried to get a new one. Like I said earlier, my professor sympathized and gave me a good grade even though I blew up the engine. Had they replaced the one valve, they would still have a working engine. However, due to their ineptitude, they now have a blown engine on their hands with a hell of a lot more wrong than a single bent valve. The next one is titled, "Want to take away our job perks?" Good luck with that. The company I was working for had a fair hash of people that traveled almost exclusively, so while it was a fairly small company at maybe 100 people on staff, across everyone I'd guess we would have about 12 to 15k nights in a hotel and over 1 million flight miles per year. That worked out quite well for everyone because they racked up a lot of rewards with hotels and airlines, so their vacations ended up costing them basically nothing. In addition to that, the company's policy was that you booked and paid for all your travel and then submitted a request to get reimbursed, so quite a lot of people were also getting insane rewards from their credit card companies as well. It was considered a perk of the job, even to the point that HR would mention it when recruiting people, and it helped people put up with some of the other BS policies they didn't like. Enter new controller, let's call her Karen. Karen decides that the company is losing money and implements a new reimbursement system where everyone gets company cards that they use, so the company gets all the CC rewards. On top of this, they also partner with a travel agency that everyone has to use to book their flights, hotels and rental cars. The idea is that since all the money, bookings are now in the company's name, the company gets to keep all the rewards. This is all great for the company, but it sucks for all the employees because this had formerly been one of the top perks. It's like each employee got a several $1,000 pay decrease. Cue malicious compliance. I expect our CEO was like a lot of CEOs in that he had an assistant that booked all of his travel and just sent him an itinerary so he knew what flight to get on, where to pick up his rental, and what hotel to check into. Similarly, when things don't go his way, he's not one for wanting the details, he just wants it fixed as soon as possible. So the admin assistant started following the procedures to the letter. CEO ends up getting stuck with shitbox cars, crappy hotel rooms and stuck in coach class because the system either has limits on what choices can be made, or wants to use reward points to book, and you can't use those type of rewards for the flights, hotels, etc. that he's used to. Additionally, when he'd run into problems, he'd call his assistant and she'd tell him she would have to call the travel agent to see what's wrong, and this would invariably occur outside business hours, so it'd take a day to get an answer. If memory serves, that policy change lasted all of 30 days before the CEO walked into the controller's office, told her it was for shit and directed that everything should be put back exactly the way that it was. After that, I know of at least a handful of people that ended up taking the CEO's assistant out for dinner, drinks as a thank you for helping to get things back to normal. The last one is titled, "And Hoa doesn't allow grass signs for any reason." Understood. A family friend lives in a neighborhood with an Hoa. They are not horrible, but they are prickly at times. One year, he hosted a large birthday party and put some temporary signs up. These were for things like what side of the street to park on, where his house was, when the party ends, and to come to the backyard instead of in the house. He had approval for the party and a paperwork trail of conversations going back a month. Imagine his surprise when a few days later he gets a $200 fine for those road signs. He contacts the Hoa to complain, but he gets stonewalled. As he pays the fine, the guy at the desk says the worst thing. "Next time, read the rules." That ticked him off, as he made an effort to follow the rules. The day after, he reads the rules and there is a sentence about all grass signs. Clearly, it's intended to keep those political signs away, but nowhere does it say, "No political signs." He takes some time and gets his plan together. He buys some political signs for the local city council members and judges he supports that are up for election. He then tapes them against his car windows so they are on the inside pointing out. For a good measure, he added some bumper stickers for the ACLU, Peace Corps, the Teachers Union, NAACP, and whatever else he could find in an evening. Every so often, he keeps his car at the end of his driveway so all driving into the complex can see. As he put it, it's a petty rebellion, but a rebellion nonetheless. Thanks for listening.